or some more of y'all will. Tommy Jones and Crystal Daniels represent risk management on the event safety committee. Tommy does, he is in another life as a firefighter, now works for the University of North Texas in risk management, so he deals with a lot of kind of the nitty-gritty details of risk assessment. And then Crystal Daniels does insurance. So certain events, say you're having an event that has inflatables, or you're using an off-campus entity or third party that's bringing something onto campus, Crystal's going to be the one that you'll get the insurance from that company, and then you'll turn it into her. Dan Goodwin obviously is our student activities representative, and then we have our additional facility reps. So if you're planning an event here in the Business Leadership Building, then we have Tasha Wells who would work with you on that event. If you're planning it for the Union or Gateway, that's going to be Donna Ritchie, or Library Mall, or Auditorium, or a lot of other places also Donna Ritchie. So she does a lot of events with y'all. And then anyone else that needs to come in, Rec Center, those are our most used spaces on campus. All right, so what we do, so I want to read this word for word. Y'all kind of read over it as I'm talking, but essentially what the Event Safety Committee does is whenever y'all submit your online event applications, those do have certain triggers built into them. If y'all say that you're going to have 400 people, or you're going to have physical activity because you're doing a flag football tournament, or you're going to have alcohol for one of your parties, those things are triggers that then alert Event Safety Committee to kind of give a closer eye towards your event. So when that happens, the system kicks your event out to our email, and that's when we review it, look over it, see why it came to us in the first place, and then decide, okay, what do we need to do with them? You can kind of see it talks about could lead to an in-person meeting, a phone conversation, or outright approval. So if it's just something that you submitted, maybe there's 80 people, and the physical activity is just you're having a little dance just for members of your org, but there's no food and there's no alcohol, that's low-key enough that we'll probably just go ahead and outright approve the event. A phone conversation, we just call them phone ESC meetings. That typically happens, I think you jam something in the crook of the door back there to keep it open. That typically happens if maybe we see, all right, you have 115 people and you put physical activity, but you didn't say what you're doing. So now we need to go ahead and have a phone call, talk that over, see exactly what it's going to be. Or you just said field day. And so we need to know, all right, what does field day be? Are you going to do a three-legged race? Are you going to have a, what is it, the rope tug of war? Thank you. Or are you going to do that? Or things along those matters. We'll want to know what you're doing. And then over the phone, we can generally talk about, all right, so for example, tug of war is a popular one, so that y'all know when you're planning your next tug of war event. They have the big loop on the end of it. You can rent it from the rec center. You can't put that loop around anyone's body. So that's something we would tell you on the phone. Reason being for that, and I've actually been at an event where, you know, you have your anchor, which might be a member of your org that is good at kind of keeping the rope back. So there is one event where the guy had the rope around him, and then their team lost, and he got pulled over, and the rope got pulled up around his arm, around his neck, and then went over his arm and just around his neck, and he got dragged, maybe only a foot or two by his neck by the rope. So obviously that's a reason enough to say that we don't want people putting the ropes around their body. During each meeting, we're going to fill out an event safety planner, and so what that's going to do is that kind of serves as the contract for your event. So if you tell us, all right, we're going to have 400 people, there's a little space and we'll write in 400 people. If you say that you're going to put a dump tank on the grounds, then there's a little spot where you check off that you'll have to alert UNT grounds, and it'll have the person's name there. His name's Lance Fullenwider, and again, this will be on your safety planner that then gets scanned and emailed out to you. So anything we go over in the meeting will end up on this planner, and then that'll get passed around and signed by everyone at the meeting, and it'll get signed by you as well. I fully encourage you, when you get the planner, read through it and make sure everything looks good, because if you meant to say 500 people, but we wrote down 100, obviously you'll want to alert us to that so that the day of the event we don't run into an issue with that. And so that's why I put the note that it's critically important. Critically important that you send someone to these meetings that has the most up-to-date information about your event. A lot of times, honestly, meetings are only once a week on Mondays, And so sometimes in org, the person who's planning the event is busy, they have class, whatever it may be, and so they just ask someone to go in their place and just kind of hear what we're going to tell them. This meeting is completely focused around y'all. We're going to ask y'all all the questions, what you're doing. So if you send someone that doesn't quite know every detail of the event, it may result in us rescheduling the meeting, and obviously your event can't be approved until after the meeting. So that's why if you are going to send someone else, make sure you tell them everything so that they have every detail to answer all our questions. So just a really brief look at an ESC phone meeting. Again, like I said, that's when it's kind of more of a small to moderate amount of risk associated with it. We don't want to have to bring y'all in for our weekly Monday meeting because that takes a little more time and kind of pushes back when you get approved. And we see a ton of events every semester, so we really don't have time to bring in every single one. So phone ESC is just going to be very low key. We're going to say, if you're doing a cookout, hey, have some or a fire extinguisher on hand. If you're serving food to people, make sure you're wearing gloves and following food safety guidelines that risk management will send to y'all. So little things like that are just real simple. Say it over the phone. Once the phone ESC meeting's done, then that's it. It doesn't have to move to any other kind of meeting. You're good to go as far or on our end. Yeah, I think I covered everything. Okay. So here's some of the things that y'all should know. If you are approved or called in for an event safety committee meeting, it does mean that your event is not approved until after that meeting. I think sometimes orgs come in thinking that this is just kind of a little piece about talking it over, but this is one of the major things with your event, and your event cannot happen if it's been earmarked for an ESC meeting until the ESC meeting has taken place. That's one of the reasons why we require y'all to turn in your event application form so early on, and so we have plenty of time to see them, go over all the information, and then maybe even schedule a meeting and then approve that meeting. Sometimes y'all's events can take a lot that has to go into them. So just make sure that you're also putting this on board. If you know you're planning something for 500-600 people, 90% of the time it will go to an ESC meeting. Or if you're planning a large dance or you want to stay overnight, that's another one that usually gets ESC meetings because you have to get additional approval. Sometimes our student orgs will do fundraisers where they stay up all night doing something. Y'all probably seen them around campus. That requires Dean of Students approval, and it's going to require a meeting. If you're going to have alcohol at your event, then that's definitely going to require a meeting. Physical activity usually is. If it's a kickball tournament with 40 of your own members, then that's probably going to get approved right away. But if you're trying to do a big fundraising tournament and you want to have 150 people there, there's a lot of moving parts, then it'll probably go to ESC. What you tell us at your meeting is what we will use to gauge the approval. So what we write down in that safety planner, again, acts as your contract. So with that, the numbers and details matter a lot. If you tell us 250 people, but then you go to your event or to your next chapter meeting, your next org weekly meeting, and you'll decide, well, we're barely going to break even. We need to increase our number to 500 and increase our marketing efforts. If we don't know about that, then that is grounds for your event to then get canceled day of. Especially because a lot of events, police officers get called in depending on the number. There's a very rough rule of 1 officer to every 100 people that definitely apply or kind of changes based on what you're doing. If it's a sit-down formal dinner and it's 200 people, then it's probably not a big deal at all. But if it's a dance with 200 to 300 people, and there might be people coming from off campus, it's not just UNT students, it might need officers. All of a sudden you decide to go out to 500 or 600 people for that dance. Now we probably need more like 4 or 5 or 6 officers that have to be working it that night. If they didn't know about that ahead of time, just so y'all know, when y'all do events that require officers, Lieutenant or Captain Bergstrom or Captain Coffee puts it into their system and basically requests officers to put in overtime pay, which all takes time. So that's another, if you decide to upgrade the number of people you want to have at your event, that's fine. We just really need minimum a week, but really as soon as you know, so we can get that into the system and make sure that there's enough officers available for it all. Like I said, if you send someone to a meeting as a fill-in that doesn't have all of the details, your meeting could be rescheduled. I want to emphasize that again because that happens a lot. We see it a lot where people get sent because they think that event safety meeting is just going to be going over a few details, or we're just going to tell y'all, all right, we'll just make sure to be careful, and then that'll be the end of it. But really, the first thing we're going to ask you when you walk in is tell us all the details of your event. And if the person just says, actually, I don't really know, someone just texted me 10 minutes ago and asked me to be here, then we aren't able to get any of the details, and then we have to reschedule. Meetings typically last, we either schedule them for 15, 20, or 30 minutes, given the size and scope of your event. And then for larger events, ESC staff will likely be in attendance. We were at one last Saturday that was here in the Union. We'll be at, when I say we, Zach will be at one tomorrow night that's on campus, and then we'll be at one next Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, in the Union as well. So for the larger events, 500, 600, 700 people, we're going to usually be in attendance. For some of y'all, your orgs may only be 20 or 30 people, and you're hearing all of this, and you're like, we're not even going to touch anything even close to that. But just to give you an idea of the scope of the type of events that event safety can see. It's another thing, if you would like event safety staff or police at your event, that's always something you can request. Even if you're only going to have 80 people, or you're inviting a lot off campus, or you'd feel better with the police officer there, it's something you always request. They're $45 an hour for UNT police, and it's a 3-hour minimum. So just some things to keep in mind when you're budgeting. Obviously, we see hundreds of events every semester, and only a small percentage of those actually go through event safety and have to have police officers. So I'm not saying it's something you're going to run into, but it's something to consider.
One thing I wanted to also touch on was that the omission of information. So we mentioned that there are triggers like physical activity or a certain number of people. If you try and lie and not put that in there, that can result in your event getting shut down. It can result in, I think, more consequences for your organization as well if you try and say there's not going to be physical activity even though we're going to be playing kickball. Because, yeah, we might just see a kickball and approve it, but we would rather see more of these events and just give the okay to them than not know about them, have somebody get hurt, then your organization becomes liable. We don't want that to happen to your organizations.
Right. So what can you do? One thing that we're seeing with the new org sync system is if y'all can submit as much detail as possible with your event, then that's going to help us out a ton. There are a lot of them that, how many of you have seen the org sync page or familiar with the page? Roughly, okay. So when you get that in there, there's a little tab that we can click on that just says event details, and it says what y'all type in as the details of the event. And more we're seeing that our orgs aren't writing anything. When that happens, we kind of have to guess what it's going to be, and so then we're scheduling phone ESCs or even ESC meetings when there really wasn't any need to. If you had just written in the details what you're going to do and it wasn't that big of a deal, we can just click approve, move on. So if you're wondering why your weekly meetings haven't been approved yet, it may be because there weren't enough details put in and we're not sure. Because we've had some clubs that do their weekly meetings, but the nature of the club has risks associated with it, like was it juggling and flow arts? Yeah. So are any of y'all in juggling and flow arts? Okay, I'm not about to insult them, that's not what I asked. So, but in their meetings, they are doing things that may require a conversation about risk. So even though we see weekly meeting, that doesn't just tip us off that, oh, they're just gonna be sitting down and talking to each other. Another one was when you run off and jump around buildings and stuff, freestyle. Parkour, thank you. The parkour club, obviously their weekly meetings and their events may be, are any of y'all in that one? Okay. Definitely sounds like a cool club, but something that even their lower key things that they're doing are things that we probably need to address in a conversation. Being prepared on the day of the meeting with as many plans finalized as possible. Sometimes groups come in and we say, all right, so you said you want to rent inflatables, who are you doing that from? And if y'all don't have that planned out yet, then we can't get the insurance information to you yet from our risk management officer. So things like that just keep pushing back approval and keep delaying things, which again, in the past day, we've gotten
200 emails with, I think, 26 events, was it?
Okay, yeah, 26 events. So that's just in one day. So we see a ton of these. So whenever we're pushing back approval, it is not personal. It is not because we think your event isn't as important as other events. It is just that it might be event number 26 that day. event safety is half of my duties. I'm also an advisor for student org. I also have other things I do within student affairs. So that's why a little bit of flexibility is also kind of required on y'all's end, and why the more details you can give us, the better, and the faster that we can just see it, click approve, you're good to go, and then we're ready to just kind of move on to the next event. Having a firm grasp on your budget and requiring that, or understanding that larger events will most likely require police officers. If you're planning for 600 people and you want to charge $10 at the door, you may be thinking, here's what it's going to cost us to throw this event, but 600 people, I can almost guarantee you is going to have police officers at the event, unless for some reason y'all can show why this is a incredibly relaxed event that has no need for officers. Usually when we see numbers like that, it's for dances and parties and things like that. And that's where officers are needed, just because, mostly for crowd control. That many people in a space with exits, when we're on campus, off-campus guests are being invited, it's just a lot to account for. And so it's usually the reason that there's that many officers is because they have to be stationed at certain points to watch all the doors. And really it's to make sure that we're not going above fire code. If the capacity, so the new ballroom in the Union capacity is 800. So capacity is 800 in the new Union Ballroom 314. If a group thinks they're going to get that many, we have to make sure that we're not getting 850, 900, because then if something happens, the university is now liable for allowing too many people into a space. So it all goes above the university level to safety and fire code. So that's why it's treated so seriously. Is that a question or a stretch?
It was a question.
Yes, ma'am.
But I know it's probably stupid, but is this just for events that are on campus or events that are off campus?
Only events on campus. We will only see events that are taking place on campus.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, is it a basketball court over by Victory? Is it called Mean Green Village?
Yes.
What is is that within all of this too? Or?
Yeah, so Mean Green Village, yes, it is. Are y'all wanting to book an event on the basketball court or in it?
It's in a gym, right?
Yeah, like where the volleyball training facility and all that stuff is?
Yeah, I think that's where the basketball boys practice, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think so.
So yeah, if we were looking to do like a dodgeball tournament or a basketball tournament or something like that in there.
Then yeah, that would go through.
The rec center, I'm assuming, do they oversee all of, because they see.
I don't know who sees those buildings over there. They see PEB and the other one, but
PEB and Blossom.
Okay.
so that one might be athletics that runs that one. A lot of our orgs that do dodgeball tournaments and basketball tournaments use the PEB across from the rec center or Bonson Gym, or even the indoor soccer field in the rec center. You may have a little more success because rec center they're more used to approving student events than athletics is, because athletics doesn't see a lot of events. So you might get a faster turnaround on one of those areas. But if you'd rather use the space over by MGV, that's fine as well. It will probably come to us, but that's something that's probably going to be a phone ESC meeting, just to say, maybe have some waivers there for people participating, so that if anyone does get hurt, your org can kind of be covered. Yeah, reduce the risk a little bit. I do know if you book one of the spaces that Rec Center does, they have their own, they have their own stuff. They have their own forms that you can then use.
Their own waivers and stuff?
Their own waivers, yes ma'am. Yep. And it reduces risk when you're using their space, because then they kind of govern it and have their own rules in place. Which again, for a dodgeball tournament, you're probably not going to run into. I doubt you're going to like put nails in the dodgeballs for a little extra fun, but they're going to have the people in the staffing already available, and so it makes it a little bit easier. Are there any other questions before I keep going? And please, anytime a question pops up, feel free to ask. There really aren't any dumb questions, because all of y'all are going to be planning very unique events. I've been here only for a year and a half now, but I've seen a crazy spectrum of events, from what you would expect with your dances and formals and dinners, to cookouts and camping overnight and cow tongue football. Hey, come on in. Which isn't actually a clever name for an event. It's actually football with a raw cow's tongue. It was not approved because there's whole sanitary issues with that. So if any of y'all were planning on hosting cow tongue football this semester, just know it's probably not going to make it through the process. So primary areas of attention, these are things that, yeah, I'll let Zach touch on.
So these are a lot of the things that we'll go over in either a phone ESC meeting or in a regular meeting. So things like food. If you're having food at your event, it might require food safety approval. So in the union, you're required to have Verde catering, especially in the ballrooms in there. But let's say you want to have an event for your student organization somewhere else on campus, you would have to, let's say you want to get food from Jimmy John's, for example. Food safety has Jimmy John's health permit on file, but let's say you want to get it from a new restaurant in town that we don't have it, that we don't have the permit available from yet. You'll just need to get a copy of that permit. You can take a picture of it and send it over to the food safety and risk management, and then it'll be all set to go. Other things like minors, this is something else that we run into a lot. TAMS students don't count as minors, so if you're having people from TAMS that are members here of UNT, they don't fall into that category. But if you're expecting people to bring families, if you're having like a banquet and you're inviting your families and their younger siblings, that will show up for us, and we may need to have a phone ESC about that, especially if there are minors, because we can't leave people under the age of 17 by themselves without their parent or guardian. So that's just something that we would go over with you in the event that that happens. Capacity, we also look at that. Some rooms have certain capacities that we need to make sure that you can't go over, things like the fire code that Austin mentioned earlier. As well, if you're looking to get near the capacity for a room, especially in rooms like the ballroom and the union, we may require wristbands for it. What we do for those is you purchase the set number of wristbands. So if you're expecting 400, you'll purchase 400 wristbands, and then once those 400 are out, the events, we can't let anybody else in. So physical activity, that's another thing that we will typically see, and Austin talked a lot about that. Eagle's Nest funding, I'm sure Dan lets you know about that, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. Having props at your event, that's another thing that we'll also need to talk about. So if you're having a performance for your organization, if you're going to be like doing like ribbon dancing or something, that would count as a prop. Obviously, we don't want you to be throwing flour, glitter. Those count as props as well, because if you ever try to clean up glitter, it's very, very difficult, and that stuff never comes out. Then it's a very difficult thing for the cleaning crew to do. So we ask, again, that you don't have glitter, flour, anything that you throw for effect at your events. Other things that we'll also mention during ESC meetings are insurance as well. Keep this in mind with a rain location for some of your events. If you're looking to have something in the library mall, just keep that in the back of your mind that you may run into having to get a rain location. So what you do when you fill out the event app is you can have alternate dates for your event. Please don't just put in one date, because if scheduling services can't get you on the one day that you put in, they're going to try and look for another day. But if you didn't put anything else in, it's going to be difficult for them to be able to reserve you a space.
I'm going to go back and echo on the glitter a little bit, not just because I despise it with every fiber of my being. If you do have something like glitter that makes a mess, that the cleaning crews cannot just easily pick up with their normal routine cleaning, your organization will be charged for a floor cleaning service. So if it's something, I know one issue we had was at the Gateway, and this was just a group that was doing a performance, a theater performance, and they had a lot of makeup, and they didn't have a tarp down on the floor, and so the makeup fell on the floor, and with people stepping in, it kind of got ground into the floor, and so that was a $200 charge to have all the floors cleaned. So that's really why we look at props. If you're wanting to try and do something unique, again, Jug and Flow Arts tried to argue the case for being able to use batons that were on fire. If you really want to try and have that conversation, we are more than willing to talk it out with y'all. We did not approve the batons that were on fire. However, if it's something different, but it's important to your event, then by all means, feel free to have a conversation with us, and we can talk it through and maybe try and find some other way that we can still have the same kind of effect without the fire or the glitter.
A lot of what we've said so far seems to be like we're kind of putting a damper on your event. We're trying to restrict a lot of things. During our meetings, we also try and offer suggestions towards the organizations, like the Juggling and Flow Arts, when they want to have batons on fire. We might suggest something else to them, or if you're looking to have something at your event and you really don't know how to go about it in the safest way possible, or you don't know if it's gonna, if it is safe, you can always get in touch with us. Or if you're in our meeting and there's still something that you need to figure out, we help out with that as well.
All right, so the one last thing that I will say to wrap it up, one, again, thank y'all very much. I fully understand that I care about this stuff a whole lot more than y'all ever will, and that's fine. It's my job to care about this stuff. Use us if you do have risk management concerns, but also feel free to contact either of us if you're just having trouble figuring out who you need to talk to. Because we work with all the different facilities, because we work with UNT Police Department, if you contact one of us and say, hey, I want to do an event here, but I don't even know who to ask, we'll put you in contact directly with the person that books the space for that area. So that's another way that you can utilize us, even if it is for something that would never go to event safety. We're more than happy to give you the name in the office or the phone number of whoever you need to be in contact with. If you're having any trouble booking your event space or whatever it may be, again, feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.